Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Rocket Lab Weekly. This is our last Rocket Lab Weekly for 2024. We are looking ahead of a very, very exciting new year, 2025, in the space industry. So let's recap this year. Let's scheme for 2025. And for that, we have Sir Matt Money, also known as Sir Peter Beck Simp. How's your
Yes.
week?
Simping towards Peter Beck as always, but it's always a good time to be able to hang out and segment a little bit of the week towards one of my favorite topics, which has obviously made us very happy this year from a wealth perspective. But we're nowhere near done, right? We're still in the beginning stages. We're only a $14 billion company, and so I say we because we're all collectively in this together. We're all shareholders. We're all owners of the company, hopefully. And if you aren't, be sure to buy a share on Monday. But yeah, it's always a good time to be able to hang out with you as always, and I appreciate you inviting me. And at the end of the day, excited to just have a little bit of an hour chat or so about one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, the same here. The same here. So I was thinking we go through the Rocket Lab news this week, and then we go through space news, of which there are not so much this week. And then I think we can look into what we expect in 2025 from the space industry, Rocket Lab, some overview, and then maybe we can take questions from the audience. Cool. So let's start with the first news of the week. If I can get it up on the screen. Let's see. No, not this one. This one was the first. So first of all, we're getting more and more pictures of the Neutron Launchpad. And that means that Neutron is ever closer to its first inaugural launch. When you look at these pictures, I'm like, I don't know what is missing, because technically, like, there's tanks, there's a water tower, the rocket can stand on something. I know maybe like not all the asphalt is done, but I'm not sure if that's 100% needed. So how do you think the progress on this one is looking?
I think it's looking good, man. I think what I'm just looking forward to most is maybe some disconnections up from the water tower to the rest of the pad that you see there, and then hopefully within the next coming months we can start getting a mock-up um, on the Neutron launch system. So it should be looking pretty good here. Looks like you have
Yeah,
pretty much everything, in my opinion.
yeah, definitely looks like we're in time for a 2025 launch. Cool.
The rocket is missing. Damn it, Vince! Why couldn't we state the obvious?
Exactly. Uh, cool. So the next one is this one, which is a slight recap of what Rocket Lab has done in 2024. So they have put 600 kilowatts into space, which could power over 650 homes, 12 fast EV charging stations, or 12,000 street lights. I just felt like this was worth. I'm not sharing. What's wrong here?
I'm seeing Twitter.
Do you see it now?
Yeah, I see it.
Awesome. So I mean, this is one of those sweet statistics. We looked at a lot of statistics last week. This was not mentioned. This doesn't mean so much to me because I don't know. I wasn't. To be honest, I don't know how much kilowatt hours each satellite means, so I don't know what this translates to. But it still feels like this is something, right?
Yeah, I mean, 600 kilowatts isn't something to sneeze at per se. You have to think how much limited real estate you have when you're sending these things out into space, and so I think it's a good piece, and I think it's also kind of in its infancy of the organization, and we have yet to really send super amount of large satellites into space. If you think about from Rocket Lab's perspective, as well as the satellites that have been launched. I'm curious to see how much Escapade would add to that. We'll probably touch on that when we get to New Glenn later today. So I'll pause that for now. But think about if Rocket Lab creates their own constellations and sends those to space, and how much more payload we can lift off from, let's just say, a neutron rocket comparatively to an electron. How much additional power would we actually be able to put up into space? I mean, if you think about the lift capability of a single neutron comparatively to what we have for an electron, it's about 40 times the amount of payload on a consistently reusable basis. It's even more so. I guess let me do the quick math here. It's about 50, 55 times more if you're doing a fully expendable neutron. So overall, it's going to be really good to see how this number continues to increase over time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I saw these comparisons between SpaceX and Rocket Lab, and people were like, yeah, SpaceX did like 150,000 tons this year to orbit, whereas Rocket Lab did like, I don't know, like 30 tons or something like this. And I don't think it's a fair comparison because it's a different class of rocket. So definitely when the Neutron starts ramping up, then it's going to be more of an apples to apples comparison. But then they will have Starship already, so then yeah, maybe it will not. Yeah, they switch up one, and we increase to a new size vehicle, so it will still be. Ah, we have a new member to your channel, Scott Cross.
Yes,
I want to give that. Yeah, want to give him a shout out. Thank you guys for supporting us, whoever's channel you decide to do it on.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Be sure to check out the hyperlink in the posts that I put, I guess yesterday or the day before.
All right, so we go on to the next one. This is some sweet drama that is in Rocket Lab circles. So Rocket Lab reported that they have four. Like Varda has ordered 4 spacecrafts from them, and our Mr. Scotto was part of a interview with Varda CEO where he said that they have 3 spacecrafts ordered from Rocket Lab, and then when Scott asked what about the 4th one, he said no, we only talked about 3 with Rocket Lab. And Rocket Lab in their presentations even today still has that Varda has ordered 4 spacecrafts. And so basically in an FCC filing, Varda now disclosed that their 4th spacecraft will be named W4, is entirely designed and manufactured by them. So now we have a sweet mystery of like what the F went wrong, who is reporting what, and we tried to discuss it last week. It's just even more official this week that there is a discrepancy because last week we only had the interview. Now we have it written in an FCC filing. So Matt, have you heard about this? And do you have any conspiracy theories of why this discrepancy?
I haven't, but I think the thought process that I think a lot of people are starting to recognize is if you give one company too much power, like a Rocket Lab, it might completely allow themselves to get boxed out from everything entirely. And so um, I anticipate that that's where Varda probably thought they would be. They probably anticipated that they'd be able to have a better partnership, and things might be cheaper. They might be able to figure out things over time. And it's likely that demand is continuing to go up from a Rocket Lab perspective. And so they said, you know what, we'll do it in house. I have a strong belief it's kind of like Palantir, right? A lot of people will try to do things on their own and then eventually they'll come back. I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that you see with Varda, but all the best. I wish them. I know that they've launched things now off of a SpaceX rocket and the Falcon 9 rocket, and I know they've been customers of Rocket Lab. So hopefully we can at least continue that partnership with respect to the launch. If they do not decide to do W5 or W6 or W7 with Rocket Lab, so I guess more to come though. The nice thing that I can see from this is that they're not slowing down, and they're obviously seeing positive results. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to send things into space. And so, who knows? Maybe it's a one-off. Maybe they just want to see how they can do on their own with W4. Maybe they'll be back for W5, W6, W7, or maybe they'll form a partnership or something of the like. So
yeah,
interesting to see. I knew something was going on because at least I was surprised that the Falcon 9 transporter was getting involved for one of their launches that they had for Varda. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And also the leading conspiracy theories that I have seen is that maybe the fourth spacecraft with Rocket Lab is actually the fifth or sixth, or maybe they're in their contract. It was like an option to order number four, um, or that they have basically ordered it, like it was part of a contract, but they were not obliged um, to go ahead with that one, because you remember that sometimes we have these discrepancies of like how many contracts Rocket Lab announces and they don't appear on the backlog. And then we actually went through their 10Q report, and they say somewhere there that the only backlog that they count is when it's it's an order that you cannot back out of, So even if you have an agreement that you're going to launch 10 electrons, but the launch becomes like non-reversible or I don't know what it's called, like binding, once they confirm something, then it's not, the 10 launches don't appear in the backlog despite them having announced the launches to the world. So I suspect it's something like this with Varda. God kväll. God kväll, Andreas. So yeah, believe it or not, this was all the Rocket Lab news for this week. It's a very it's Christmas week. Not much is happening, but there is a lot of things in the space industry happening, and one of them is that this baby did its first hot fire or no, what is it called?
static fire.
Static fire, exactly. Thank you. So they did the first static fire, and on the same day they got the license to finally launch New Glenn. I just want to play this. I love the sound of rockets. So
I do too, man.
I don't think.
I
Okay,
didn't listen to it. I was listening to it late night, so I didn't actually listen to it, but I saw it. I'm curious to see what it sounds like.
I'm pretty sure it's not going to work. So I'm like resharing it because for some reason my sound never works. So I reshared it. Please let me know if there is no sound. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Boom. I don't know what it is. When the rocket engine starts, like this initial sound is, I love it. It's like, cannot have enough of it. Even though this is not the neutron or the electron, it's still 2, 1. I don't know what they count down to after when the rocket is already going. Maybe like to max power or something. But yeah, this baby is going to fly soon. And actually, now that we're on this topic, it's going to be a very interesting change next year in the space industry because there is a lot of competition coming. We are going to have Starship. I believe they will start taking paid customers this year. We will have New Glenn flying. We will have ULA Vulcan being certified, and we will have Neutron coming online. Any predictions, fears, nervousness? Because it is going to be like a space age 2.0. We never had this many rockets available to the market.
Well, I think one of the things that people messaged me was, I don't know if they want me to disclose who it is or not, but they're like, "Is this bad for Neutron?" And I think at the moment it's a different class of rocket. It's a little bit heavier. You have to think would pay the extra 20 or so $1 million actually be worthwhile? At least for now, they're slating that it's going to be 65 million to launch. I don't know if that's what they're actually going to charge customers, or if that's actually the cost to launch for Blue Origin, right? So I guess that's a question I'm kind of curious. If it's 65 cost to launch, does that mean the sales price is going to be 65 million? Is it going to be 80, 85? And so my question to people would be is if it is 70, 80, 85 million and it has a much larger payload capacity, would it just be better to use a Falcon 9 or a Neutron, right? Where the entry price is going to be slightly cheaper than that 80 or so million that I'm kind of predicting for the ASP. But also at the moment, you kind of have to look at this New Glenn, specifically this launch, as a very symbiotic relationship right now between Blue Origin and Rocket Lab due to the fact that it's going to be carrying the Escapade rockets, I think.
Is
I would
it? No,
anticipate.
I think it's ASTS. I think the
Is it
first.
ASTS? Is that what it says?
I'm actually not sure now that you.
Because at least for the, I know that the Escapade rockets were going to be the first thing on New Glenn, but I know that they were delaying it, but that was the delay. So
Does anyone in the comments know what they're? I'm glancing over it, but I don't see if they're mentioning who is. I mean, it might be a demo weight that they're launching.
It might be. So I'll have to do some research on that. But New Glenn is supposed to carry Rocket Lab satellites, whether it's this launch or the next. I know when this was slated for early December, this New Glenn rocket, it was supposed to carry the Escapade. And if you remember, so
Yep.
people are having some mixed comments. It's supposed to be, what is it specifically for? Space reusable.
Blue Ring this launch. But what is the Blue Ring? That's also, I saw that in the article.
I don't know what Blue Ring is.
You see, this is not Blue Origin Weekly. We are not so well versed in that company.
So yeah, I mean, regardless if it is successful, Escapade will be at least on New Glenn, whether it's this launch or a different launch. So in that respect, it should be positive. My fear is though, is that if they fail this launch, then it would obviously delay the Escapade launch until likely late 26 or early 27. So that's kind of my other thought process around what this is. So
yeah,
I'm curious to see if we'll hear more from it from Rocket Lab. If it seems like there's mixed, some people are saying that it is going to launch, some people are saying it's not. So curious to see if Rocket Lab will eventually, with the news and everything coming out, if we'll at least be able to see it on X over the next week or so.
Yeah, we're going to see it. And by the way, regarding the competition, I just want to say that for all these rockets, like in the rocket industry, I think that there is a time between like selling a contract and then delivering it, and that lead time is probably 1 to 2 years currently, especially if your rocket has been in development. It could be that the New Glenn is booked up the first 10 or 15 flights. So I think that if you want to keep tabs on how the competition is doing, you need to weigh the contract announcements, because I think that New Glenn is sold out for 2025, or should be, maybe even 2026, maybe even 2027, and it's the same with Neutron, because they're flying once this year in 2026. As I understand, they have their first commercial customer. And if they get into the NSSL program, maybe 2026 and 7 is going to be sold out. And then even if they announce a contract in 2025, it will be for like 2028. So I think that if you are worried and want to track, then it's more like, track the contract announcements. And if you see that Blue Origin is announcing a lot of contracts, whereas Rocket Lab is not announcing contracts, that's obviously a bad sign. And if you see Rocket Lab announcing full of contracts and all the other companies being quiet, it's a sign that Rocket Lab is eating their lunch.
Thank you, Hot Curtis, for the 5 members, man. Gave us both 5. That's much appreciated.
Exactly. My God, thank you so much, Curtis. He sent such a nice Christmas message to me. It almost it was very, I almost got emotional on it. It was very nice. Thank you so much for being here, Curtis.
Yeah, Curtis is a good guy. I love Curtis a lot.
Yeah. Cool. So the last thing that I want to talk about this week, and then we can go into Q&A, is there is an article by Eric Berger about some rumors on how NASA might change under Trump. And normally this guy has very good sources, so I think that we can, I don't want to say treat these things as facts, but I think he has been very accurate in the past. So I think it's like 90% certain that these are the things that are going to happen. And the ideas that are being considered for an executive order for Trump is establishing the goal of sending humans to the moon and Mars by 2028, canceling the costly space launch SLS rocket. And what's new is that even Orion spacecraft is on the chopping block, as it seems. Then they want to consolidate, I can't speak, Goddard Space Flight Center and Ames Research Center, and move everything to Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. And they want to retire a small administration. They want to retain a small administration presence in Washington, but otherwise moving the headquarters out to a field center. And they want to rapidly redesign the Artemis lunar program to make it more efficient, which is obviously needed if you cancel Orion and the SLS. If these things are done, then NASA is going to have, one, a lot of money, and two, is going to be looking for commercial solutions to take humans to the moon and Mars, and do a lot of space exploration. Both of them are extremely good news for Rocket Lab. So Matt, what do you think? How bullish is this for Rocket Lab?
I have no idea.
I think that the SLS, that canceling the SLS and Orion, I think will save 30 billion for NASA. Can that be correct? I don't know how much the consolidation. I cannot speak. How do you say this word? Consolidate. Did I say it correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So if you consolidate Ames and Goddard and the Alabama into one, that should say, I don't know if that saves a few billion or just hundreds of millions. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not 100%. I mean, hopefully it allows, if you think about it, I mean, maybe this helps if you do consolidate some of those branches and allow yourself to maintain a similar budget, then it might allow you to actually do more in terms of actual operations from a getting to orbit perspective, rather than operating expenditures for keeping 3 different sites alive, right? So anyway, just some thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, I more meant that the SLS, like if you cancel that, right, like that was the solution to land on the moon and go to Mars, right? And it was like a 30 billion dollar budget. I think that's what has been spent on it already, and it's like tens of billions more that should be spent on it. And that means two things: that you will have money in the coffers, right? And then you will be looking for commercial solutions to replace SLS with. And I mean, if not everything, like if not all of that money goes to SpaceX, because that's the worry that a lot of people have, that Elon is buddy with Trump, and then he will take all the space contracts. I'm sure he will take a lot. I very highly doubt that he will take all. Then this should bode really, really well for Rocket Lab. No?
Yeah, I think this coupled with the operating software that's going to be on the Blue Ghost, which is Firefly's lunar lander. I think both of those will play a stepping stone into whether or not and how much Rocket Lab potentially plays into sort of these Artemis moon missions going forward, and where does it play. So I mean, I think you have multiple things that are kind of shaping up I think first and foremost, the fact that Rocket Lab is here to stay, has 500 million in the bank that they can use, and they're getting closer and closer towards profitability. And you have more and more people leaving. Boeing, SLS, obviously having struggles, and a few other companies continuing to struggle as well going forward. I think it only bodes well for Rocket Lab, and I think it'll open doors just based on the fact of being at the right place at the right time. They might not necessarily have wanted or thought about doing some of these contracts, but with the optionality, it might do well for them. But at the same time, it seems like Sir Peter Beck and Adam are very adamant about making sure they don't take on too much. And so my curiosity is, at what point do you, I guess, take on too much, right? And to me, I guess it all just depends on what is too much, right? Do you have, like, I think Electron, they have that off and running. That's its own separate entity. It's been running now pretty frequently since 2017, and the cadence is only getting better there. So I feel like in that respect, that's kind of a self-sustaining entity on its own. But you're still building Neutron, you're still building Haste, you're still building the Constellation piece. How thin do you want to stretch the company? And that's where you kind of see something that has been growing and has a good bread and butter, and then eventually you lose a little bit of focus. And I think that's what ends up happening with companies like Boeing and many others. And so it's, to me, it depends. You want to be a jack of some trades but not all trades, because once you get into a jack of all trades, you lose focus of what the purpose of the organization is. And so I guess my question is really trying to understand, what is exactly the MO for Rocket Lab, and does it fit into their three-tier purpose system, right? The obviously the launch capability, the satellite construction, then satellite operations piece. And if it doesn't really fit into that, I hope that they just don't lose focus and start to do things that, don't build into that end-to-end space mindset. So anyway, just some thoughts there.
Yeah, thank you for that. When the 50% dip, yeah, we're all waiting for that. But you know what's funny? All the guys that are waiting for the 50% dip are going to say, it's at $12, it's going to go to 8, so I'm not buying yet. I promise you this. I've seen it too many times.
See it all the time. See it all the time.
Yeah. So I think this is the end of the normal segment that we do. As I said, this week has been very thin. There was a thing called Christmas, and a lot of people are spending time with the family. And I guess Sir Peter Beck and the Rocket Lab team are doing the same, which they should be. So they recharge and they can make 2025 amazing. So I think we can do a little bit of Q&A, and if you guys have any questions, you can put it in the chat. I saw somebody asked, what is our price prediction for next year? I highlighted it. I don't find it now, but you know who you are. So I'm going to ask you, Matt, what do you think the stock is going to do? Give us some financial advice here.
Not financial advice. Last time I wrote an article on Seeking Alpha, which I've been meaning to, and apologies for my delay in writing an updated article, obviously about Rocket Lab. That prediction had it at about $15 for year end 2025. But of course, that was before we had a lot of catalysts. And so this was going back into August. And if you actually look, let me share my screen if you don't mind. Let me post this in here. Hopefully it shows up in your chat, but if not, I'll independently put it in. We've been having issues with StreamYard off and on, actually, a little bit for some folks. So just recognize. So anyway, I posted in the chat on my stream the actual article link, but let me actually share the thing here. So this is before, so apologies. This is a little bit zoomed in, but let me zoom in a little bit more. You can see actually in this graphic here to the lower right, the two articles that I've written now about Rocket Lab. And obviously the second article was around the $8 range, I think, or sorry, 674. I rated it a strong buy, and obviously it's up 300% since then. This was August 2024. So few months past when I've written in the past, so I need to take that opportunity now, um, to take a writing on this piece. So I put that link in the description for you guys. But even still, I think that had a price target of $15 by year end 2025. That was before we had obviously this big 300% run up after that article was written. I still think if you were to think about where Neutron is in terms of where it is on the spectrum of getting launched, and it does get launched, then I don't see a reason why this company shouldn't be worth $20 billion. And the reason being is not for financial reasons, not for the fact that they're going to be rated at, let's say, a 10 times earnings or a 20 times earnings. Because let's just be frank, I don't think that at the moment the company can be valued in that respect. What I think I would value the company at right now is how much money would it cost to replicate what is being done at Rocket Lab. So, in order
Mm.
to be able to do the space systems that they have, the solar reaction wheels, etc., and all of the kit that they've been able to pick up, think about the Virgin Orbit facilities that they picked up for pennies on the dollar. Think about the different facilities they've built in Virginia to be able to have all that, to replicate all of that over time, and with the expertise that they've had since 2006, and to be able to sustain, I think you would need about $20 billion if Neutron gets off the ground. And to think, I mean, at that point, there really only is several other companies that are pure kind of space companies that have been able to get to that point at that point, which would be Rocket Lab, Blue Origin, and 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 SpaceX. And I'm not counting ULA, or I'm not counting Boeing in that respect, because they have complementary businesses that space isn't directly their physical business. So they can kind of steal from one to pay off the other. But if you were to have a solely strict space company and build it from the ground up, that's where I see that $20 billion valuation. So that would put the stock, and that's at a fair valuation, right? Like, I'm not saying the pendulum is one way or the other. I'm saying like in the middle, because I could easily see it where it gets to a $30 billion market valuation by the end of next year because of hype, right? Just because people are so into space and the things that are there, and that would put it at a $60 per share price target. But for now, just kind of like an even ground, no big hype or anything like that. I would put out a $20 billion valuation, because I think that that's how much it would cost to replicate what this company is doing.
That is an interesting viewpoint. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know what to say. My predictions on the stock price have been horrible.
As of mine,
sorry?
As of mine, so don't feel bad. Yeah.
I mean, I do feel that on the short term, like, we are due for a little pullback or going sideways, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the stock at year end at what you said, like $30-40. But I would not be surprised to see the stock at $16. Like, I feel that right now there's a lot of positive momentum on, and it doesn't have to be like a Rocket Lab thing either, because when the stock price was down in the fours, it wasn't because Rocket Lab was doing bad, it was because the macro was doing bad. Like, all the small caps were categorized into one group, and then all the unprofitable small caps was categorized into a subset of that group, and then they were just punished into oblivion. And now I feel like certain companies just got rewarded into the moon. And I think any slight, like, the market can react very bad to any slight delay with Neutron. If we don't get maybe the Mars sample return, but I also can see a lot of catalysts, that can come to the stock's way. So my advice is, which has always been, is you do your due diligence, and if you feel that the company is below fair value, then you buy, because as Matty Capital, or aka Simp for Peter Beck, usually says, you can only guarantee the price that you have today. So I can tell you when Palantir was in the $14, and a lot of people said, we think it's undervalued, but we will buy again when it goes back down to 8. And guess what? It never went back down to 8. Those people are still waiting, and the stock is $80, And the same thing can happen with Rocket Lab, that we just go to the 40s and we never go back to the teens. And then you just waste a lot of money waiting on the magical pullback while the stock was in your buy range.
No, 100%. I mean, to me, I think the company right now, it sounds very like rudimentary and it sounds very simple. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's as Julian says, I can't imagine it going back to 16. I used to be in this group who couldn't imagine certain stocks doing certain motions. I got disabused about this idea. So I think if the Fed would announce that the US economy is doing too strong, or inflation is coming back and they're not lowering interest rates anymore, and there's some bad things happening in the Middle East, I think that could send the stock down, which is without the fault of Rocket Lab. Like, Rocket Lab can still be doing insanely amazing, and the stock can go down to 16.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very bullish on the company. I agree with you. Well, I think that in the long term, the company is obviously going to go way north of $40 a share. I mean, I have $40 puts sold for, so like in the money puts sold for January 2027, and
That's
whenever
pretty
the
good.
whenever the ones for December come out, December 2027, I'll roll or maybe add one of those. I have to decide what I want to do, but basically I'm just trying to get the premium up early, and maybe I'll use that for buying some calls or what have you. But and it's risky, so I don't, want other people to kind of copy that. But just goes to show you how bullish I am. But going back to what Julie's point is, I think the pendulum can always swing, right? I think you're 100% right there, Vince. So, while I don't necessarily think it warrants a $16 share price, any recession can come and really deflate a lot of the stocks. And Rocket Lab, I think, actually deserves the valuation that it's getting, unlike a lot of the other space companies that have, which to me means, I think comparatively to what some of these other space companies have gotten in terms of valuations, I think Rocket Lab should actually probably be about 40 to 50% higher. If you were to have the hype built into it, like some of these other space companies, because some of these other space companies have just absolutely ran a couple 100% comparable to what Rocket Lab has. They don't have nearly the product or expertise or execution ability that Rocket Lab does. So why they're running in a comparable way to something like Rocket Lab is kind of a head scratcher to me. So my fear is for a lot of people out there, and this is kind of where I see a lot of people heading. They're getting into companies that are maybe sub subprime. They're not necessarily the best companies to probably dipping your toes into. There's a potential high risk, high reward situation there, and they're putting the same sort of risk profile that they're putting on a Rocket Lab as they are into these new companies. And so I think some people might get burned. And so, I hope that people continue to do well, but I see a lot of people putting a lot of money into a lot of uh, what's the word, tertiary, or yeah, I guess tertiary is probably the right word, kind of space companies, hoping for the same sort of result of a Rocket Lab. You have to think Rocket Lab's the number two in all of potential the space industry going forward, behind SpaceX. Everything else is kind of dying around it. Maybe Blue Origin has some life behind it. We'll see if Relativity has some life behind it. Astra seems to still be a DOA. We're continuing to see other companies struggle to keep up and get financing. Stoke seems to be doing okay, but I don't know how much money they have left, and so it's hard to kind of keep track with some of these private companies. But my fear is that you have people that are like, "Ooh, this 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 company provides something to SpaceX, or that company provides something to SpaceX, so it has to win." It's like that's not necessarily a guaranteed truth, and so I just want you guys to recognize that. Take your wins now, but make sure that you're appropriately hedging yourself for if the market decides to turn, because not every company will be able to survive like Rocket Lab will. And I'm not I'm not trying to be the bear in the room here, but I've seen it happen over, I'm not, some sort of oracle or anything like that. I've just been investing for 10, 11 years, and I see people chase and dump money into something. And then as soon as it seems like you can't lose anymore, the market turns on its head and the pendulum swings. Well, the pendulum swing very quickly, and I don't know how long it's going to stay on this side of the, I guess the I don't know what the right term is there, the path. But if it decides to even swing to the middle or back towards where it was with a recession, it's not going to be bueno for your pockets. So
yeah. For example, one thing that like a lot of people are super bullish about Trump, and I am too, but the Doge, like I think that how do you call it? Like Trump does not need to get reelected, and he has a lot of radical ideas that he wants to get done. And if I was him, I would take all the pain in year one. Like I would make all the the catastrophe decisions in year one, because then you have 2 to 3 years to like undo the, like how do you call it, like to get used to the new system. And then like for example, if you make super much cuts on the government spending, like that is going to hurt the economy, right? But if you hurt the economy in year one, and then year two you can like do tax cuts, and like people get used to it, then year four people like forget kind of what happened and everybody's doing good again. There is the trade tariffs. Like if I was Trump, I would try to issue all the tariffs and start all the negotiations with the different countries. I don't know how serious he is about making Canada the 51st state. It's hilarious to read it. But what I'm trying to say is it could be pain year one, despite Trump is, it's like going to the gym. Like first you need to get a lot of muscle pain before you get the six packs.
Yeah, and Julie, I see you're saying you don't want the pendulum to swing. The pendulum, it took a while. If you think it will swing, but it took a while, right? I mean, it took really, I would say, from probably November 2021 is when, because this was a SPAC, right? Rocket Lab specifically, but things were kind of hyped up, things were doing well. November 2021, and then probably end of 2022, early 23, things were terrible. So if you think about where we were, it took about 2.5 years before the pendulum really started to swing the other direction. And so, who knows how long we stay in this kind of euphoric state. Generally speaking, I feel like it swings way faster in the negative direction than it does in the positive direction. So, who knows, right? I feel like we've been on this path for 6 months. Does it go another 6 months to a year? I could see that, but just for everybody that's not investing in high quality companies, just be careful. And there's some great ones out there, like Curtis was mentioning Redwire. I think Redwire is good. I've looked at their financials; they seem to be in a good space. But to me, some of these other companies, it's like, who are they still going to rely on? They're still going to rely on SpaceX. They're still going to rely on Rocket Lab. They're still going to rely on Blue Origin to get to space. So to me, it's like, why invest in those tertiary companies when you have a company that's already making satellites? You have a company that knows how to operate satellites. You have a company that knows how to launch the satellites. Like, to me, it's like investing in, I don't know. I'd have to think of the comparable, but it's like investing in Qualcomm when in reality you want to just be owning Apple.
It's like investing in instead of buying Bitcoin, you buy the Hoktua coin because it's also crypto, and crypto is going to do well.
Yes, yeah, something like that. I'll have to perfect it. I'll have to perfect my analogy, but you're on the right track there, Vince.
Yeah. So 2025 is coming. What do you think is going to be like? Which stocks are like? We know we're hot on Rocket Lab, but other than Rocket Lab, what sectors do you think are going to do well? Do you have any stocks in mind? Hug to a coin we should buy?
I'm full port on Fartcoin, like Curtis is talking about. No, I think I was telling you a little bit before. I mean, one of the things that I've been slacking on, which now I'm starting to kind of fully recognize now that I have a little bit of a time and really perspective to really think about it, is definitely some Bitcoin. I already have a decent amount, so I'm not trying to start from zero here. I already have, over a coin, in terms of equivalent, and so my hope is to add 2 to 3% of my salary, and then I'm running options against some of my positions on Bitcoin as well. Whatever profits I get from that, and this is something some of the members have already seen me kind of do. Um, I take that profit, whether it's a couple $100, $400, whatever, and I roll. Whenever I roll it, I say, all right, well, I rolled, yes, because I always roll things. I don't generally close out and then open new. So even I roll it, I'm still taking profit most of the time. Like, I'll roll it because it's already 90% profit. So I'll roll it for the next month or so. I'm not rolling for a negative reason. So don't take that connotation as if I'm rolling to just like get more money or go farther out and strike price. I'm rolling because I generally write more short dated options. So generally speaking, when I roll, I'm like, all right, well, I made $400. Let me put that $400 into a Bitcoin ETF of my choosing, right? So there's that piece. So other than really Bitcoin, I've been doing a lot of research on what energy company, or energy services company I'd be willing to put money into, and at the moment, I still think it's early, but we're continuing to see prices, even though oil, at least in the U.S. side, has been flat at about $70 a barrel. I've been looking at what companies warrant, um, the opportunity for my investment. I do have some share-based compensation from UDOC, undisclosed oil company, coming in next year, and so part of that will likely go towards whatever energy investment, because I feel like 2025 there's going to be a dip down again in oil price. And if that's the case, I want to buy when prices are super low. So I'm kind of have my eye out as to what companies are still performing okay, even in this somewhat weaker price environment for oil, so that when we do have that leg down, I have the opportunity to strike fast and I already kind of have it picked out rather than being in panic, right? I have a little bit of calm and time right now. So that's kind of my thought process. And then, um, so oil is one of them. And then I do want to re engage into my, income portfolio, whether I go more cash flow in the real estate side and try to buy like, properties for like 30 or 40% down, or if I actually do more like, dividend specific plays, which I've been talking about with Curtis a good bit as well. I might do more of that, and that might fund like a vacation fund or something like that to kind of offset, because right now my cash flow can be a little lumpy. So like I just normally have my normal expenses, but then I'll go on vacation and that'll cost, a couple grand. And so that might add a little bit, and then it takes me a month or two to kind of come back to normal. So if I kind of set up a dividend fund that can be used almost as like a vacation fund, I could steal from that, and it'll help normalize, um, maybe some of my cash flow on a normal basis, and then eventually it hopefully will grow as I feed it to kind of really just offset my entire income.
Nice, nice. So if I summarize it, so it's Bitcoin, an energy service company, right? That you're very bullish on. Is there some other thing that you're looking at?
Sorry, what was the second one you said? I cut out.
An energy service company. You didn't
Yeah.
mention which company it
Yeah,
was.
I'm still looking at which ones, for that one. It's either the actual oil and gas producers or the service companies. So something like Liberty Energy or something like that. I could see Halliburton, Schlumberger. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to do the actual oil company or service company. Both, I think, in a down market are good to buy into, but I haven't chosen which one yet. I have some higher tier players that I'm looking at, or like high graded players that I'm looking at. But and then in terms of the dividend stuff, I'm still gambling, not gambling, that's not the right word. I'm still pondering whether I do something, that Curtis was recommending, which is more high
What
yield, or
what is the you mean the SPYT, right?
yes, yeah, that's what him
What
and I
is
have been
that?
chatting about. Yeah. It's like a covered call ETF specifically around the S&P 500, and so they try to keep the net asset value at around $20 a share, but they also try to yield out 20% through return of capital and also the options income. And so I've been looking at that, or do I do an XYLG, which is also a covered call ETF, but that one more so is price appreciation coupled with a little bit less yield. So that would probably only yield you 4.5 to 5%, but you're going to track closer towards what the S&P 500 is. You're always going to underperform because you're writing covered calls in terms of the principal appreciation, but at the same time, you get a little bit more income. So it kind of just depends on what you're going for. Do you want to continue to have the price appreciation, or do you want to have a little bit more of the income aspect of things? So that's the one thing that I'm kind of looking at is for SPYT. That's only come out since March 2024, and so there has been some 5 to 10% pullbacks since it's come out, but we've always been in a pretty upward trend. And so it's very easy to look at it and say, oh, it's always going to hold $20 forever. But what happens if we have an extended drawdown like we did in 2022, right? How is it going to react? And that's kind of my fear with some of these covered call ETFs, right? So
How much? Because I also have seen articles and comparisons that the cover call ETFs like underperform the S&P 500. But is it like
yeah.
a little bit of underperformance? Like if the S&P 500 is 10% and then they make 8%, or is it like this year the S&P 500 did 30% and they did 8? Or
It really depends. So let me do a quick example here. Let me share my screen. Sorry, I know this is completely off topic for Rocket Lab Weekly, but I think it's important for people to see. So this is the normal S&P 500. Let's go for the past year. Yeah. So you can see it's up about 24%. And if you had something like SPYT, keep in mind this doesn't include the dividends, right? So this is just the principal. The principals remain relatively flat. You can see the pull downs kind of match comparably to when the pull downs are in the S&P 500 as well. The S&P 500 being in blue and SPYT being in yellow. But keep in mind this yellow is distributed about 20% or so in but and also
cash
it's
flow?
not like for like because this starts in March versus January, right? So there's a little bit of lag behind that. But then you have something like XYL. Sorry, let me do XYLD first. So XYLD is completely covered calls on. So you basically own the S&P 500 for SPY or sorry XP sorry S XYLD, and with those covered calls, they write covered calls on 100% of the volume. So you're seeing you're underperforming. In this case, you get a 10% recovery, not recovery, 10% principal appreciation, but you get 8 or 9 or maybe even 10% dividend yield on an XYLD. So in reality, you're getting closer to 20% return. So kind of comparable to what you're seeing maybe for Defiance if you were to include the 20% dividends for the Defiance S&P 500 or
So
SPYT.
So if I summarize it, is it a correct statement that the S&P 500 did 25% and on the other two you did about 20%, and one was capital gains and the other one was basically
I
cash
haven't
flow?
done that, so I just want to state I haven't done this. Right, it's something I'm keeping track of because to me the way I look at it is I I don't want to invest in something that has a 20% yield that can have massive principal erosion. Right, let's say I have a million
Yeah,
dollar
yeah.
portfolio and or maybe not even that. Let's just say I want to make 20 grand a year, right? Would I feel more comfortable investing, let's say 100 grand into a product that could have massive NAV erosion, which is possible with SPYT? I don't know. It hasn't been around long enough for me to kind of get a full feel for it yet. Or would I rather have something that has $400,000 into it or $500,000 into it and invest it in an XYLG, which is this orange, which gets about 3/4 or 2/3 of what the S&P 500 return is, 17% versus the say 24%, but it also is yielding 4.5 to 5% yield. And so to me, it's like, where do I want to be? Do I want to be full income and keep my principal flat, even in a bull market? Or would I rather be something like in this orange or blue, where blue being, this, keep in mind, this is a bull market. It's the same exact underlying piece, which gets you a 10% return versus the 24%. So you're underperforming here by 60%, right? 24%, 10%, that's literally 60% less in total return from this blue, light blue to this dark blue. But keep in mind, you're also getting an 8-9% dividend yield. So it gets you closer to an 18-19%. So not too far off. Keep in mind, the S&P 500 has a 1.5% dividend yield on its own. So this is probably closer to 26% total return. This Defiance would show up as 18-19% total return. But this S&P 500 global, this is going to get you 4 to 5%. So this could be about 18 plus 4 plus 5. So you're going to get pretty comparable, maybe a little bit of overall return loss. Keep in mind, you have to pay taxes on some of these things or not, depending on what kind of account you have them in. But to me, it's like, I'd be willing to me, that this seems like the best of all worlds is orange. You're getting principal appreciation, you're getting a higher than above average dividend yield. And I feel like you won't have as much NAV erosion. But keep in mind, kind of like what you were alluding to, is the impacts of when you do have market declines. Keep in mind, you're generally speaking, one for one, going to have the same declines as, say, an S&P 500 fund. So you can kind of see they track relatively well in 2022 when they declined. They kind of run in parallel, but then you start to deviate once you kind of go on this bull market. That's the covered call aspect of things going into play. And so you can see over a 5-year period, they've obviously deviated very extensively, but at the same time, you're getting that larger dividend yield as well. And they're not exactly like for like, because this started in mid 2020 as well. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt.
It's so interesting that they don't like that you get like the fall, you get one for one, because you would think that, okay, the cover calls would be printing money as the market is going down.
But you have to think, you're only getting a slight, you're offsetting a little bit. I wonder if I can zoom in. I can't. You're only offsetting it a little bit. Like, I'm sure if you looked at it during the covered call fund, like if you go back here, it's not exactly one for one. Like, you could see you perform a little bit better on XYLG, but and same thing here. Like, you can see it performs a little better, but in same thing here, you can kind of see it from in October, it performs a little better, but overall it doesn't make up for the fact that you are massively going to deviate in an extremely bull market. Now, if it's a very flat market, I don't necessarily know how much it's going to deviate, because like you can see, maybe in this, once you had the majority of the impacts in 2022, it kind of ran in parallel. But it really, once you got to the end of 2023, this October 2023 piece, they really started to deviate again, because we've been on such a bull run over the last year.
Very, very interesting. Well,
but another thing you have to keep in mind is you're only comparing principal, right? So you're not comparing the 4 to 5% yield that you're getting from this XYLG. So
yeah. Well, keep us posted on how it has gone.
Trying to be rich.
Cool.
Like you,
It's the other way around, mister. Cool. Well, I think that this was a fantastic discussion for this week. I really want to wish everyone a super happy new year. We're going to be here and talk about Rocket Lab, space stocks, and other stocks. I think I'm going to try to live stream the New Glenn launch if they are going to have a live stream. I don't know if they are. Maybe we can do that together.
For sure.
And yeah, so may your stock stays green, your dreams come true, and see you guys in 2025.
See you guys. Ciao. Thank you. Sorry for my monologues.